U.S. House of Representatives recently passed H.R. 5, which in this proposed legislation dubbed the Equality Act, it seeks to edit the Civil Rights Act of the 1960s by inserting a new category for non-discrimination, that of sexual orientation as well as gender identity. Now, without getting deep into the political dynamics of this proposed legislation and ultimately the dangerous implications for those who hold to a Christian worldview, what we have to realize is that foundational to this assertion is the denial of the creation order. The denial that God created humanity as male and female. In these midweek devotionals, we've been looking at Ephesians chapter 5, and we're preparing to launch into how Paul connects grace and unity to our relationships as human beings. And he begins by the most foundational relationship of human beings, that of male and female in marriage. But prior to jumping directly into Ephesians chapter 5, I feel like we need to take a step back and understand the biblical perspective and the reality of what God has created in creating humanity. So today I want us to take a look back in Genesis chapter 1. Genesis chapter 1, beginning in verse 26, we read this. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heavens, over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth, subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heavens, over every living thing that moves on the earth." And God said, "Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of the earth, every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and everything that creeps in the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food." And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. This is the opening chapter of the Bible. God is asserting that he has created humanity as male and female, he created them. Before launching into Ephesians chapter 5, we need to understand the creation order of how God has made us to be. And today, the main point I want you to realize, we need to celebrate God's making male and female in his image. So what does that mean? Well, we see that God said this was very good. On days 1 through 5, he said it was good. On day 6, he said it was very good. The biblical perspective of gender roles and distinctions is that they are designed by God to complement one another. The theological term here is complementarianism. That's a big word, and it's been attacked over recent decades from a variety of different angles, but I believe it rightly summarizes the biblical perspective. There are two extremes in this world. One is abusive male chauvinism. Men use their physical strength to dominate women. Men discount a woman's opinion and her voice simply because she is a woman. We don't have to look long across history to see it's littered with examples of this abusive relationship. But even more so, even today, we see this all across the world. There are many branches of Islam where women are still today treated merely as property. While most men here in America today would not consider a woman property, they often discount women as less than themselves by how they act and how they joke. And the results are that women suffer, often silently, as victims of abuse rather than being cared for, cherished, and loved as God intended. The opposite extreme in our world today is this feministic nullifying of gender differences. This argues that there are no significant differences between men and women. The differences that exist are blown out of proportion and therefore should be ignored. Men should be more feminine, women should be more masculine. This is the worldview that is behind this recent gender identity craze. I say that intentionally because while there are many people who are sadly deeply confused on this issue, the cultural trends and fads that are driving this make it a way for someone to become popular or famous. The results are that men fail to be men, women fail to be women, and children growing up in this generation have little to no idea of who God has made them to be. You see men who are unrespectable and ultimately unbearable, and women who get stuck bearing everything in regards to the family. There's a long history of abuse and violence when it comes to men and women and the relationship between them. Yet the answer is not to reject the category of man and woman. The answer is to go back to the Scriptures and look at what the Bible has set forth as the biblical perspective for how men and women should relate to one another. Remember back here in Genesis chapter 1 verse 27, "So God created man in His own image. In the image of God He created him. Male and female He created them." You are a male or a female at the core of your identity as a human being. In the image of God, He has made you as such. This is biology at work. We know from science that the DNA is divided at that most basic level between male and female. But it extends deeper than biology. It extends to the very personhood deep within your soul. This is a great and grand reality for you to celebrate, that God has made you in His image exactly as you are. But realize this is not about competency. It's not about ability. It's not about skills. There's a great illustration I read many years ago that pictures this and paints it beautifully for us. A young single man meets a young woman after church one day, and he's interested to get to know her more. So he says, "Hey, would you like to go out for a scoop of ice cream?" She responds to this invitation, interested to get to know this young man more, and agrees to go out for this ice cream. He says, "Don't worry, it'll be my treat." As they walk down the street, the ice cream parlor is just a block or two away. They get to know one another more. He finds out that she is actually a trained black belt martial arts expert. She's won awards statewide for her abilities in martial arts and self-defense. As they walk down, they're rounding the last corner to the ice cream parlor. Two men jump out in front of them. These are obviously there to attack and to rob them. They look at the young man walking next to this young lady and they say, "We want everything you've got, including her." And the young man steps up. He knows that she's a black belt in karate. He knows that she has better self-defense skills than he does, but he steps up and says, "Over my dead body." The men attack. He is quickly subdued and knocked to the ground, unconscious. And as the men turn around, they get their teeth kicked in by this young woman who is an expert in martial arts. They are left bleeding and bruised on the concrete there until the police arrive. And as the young man wakes up and barely comes to consciousness, this young lady is looking down, smiling at him, thinking, "This is the type of man I can marry." You see, at the heart of mature manhood is the God-given sense, the disposition, the inclination of that primary responsibility, not the sole responsibility, but the primary responsibility of leadership, initiative, provision, and protection. And at the heart of mature womanhood is the God-given disposition, the inclination that none of this implies her inferiority, but that it is a beautiful thing to come alongside such a man and gladly affirm and receive this kind of leadership, provision, and protection. You see, complementarianism is about the equality of personhood. Both men and women are created by God equally in His image as persons standing before God. It's about the equality of dignity. Because we are both made in the image of God, therefore both man and woman deserve equal dignity and honor and respect. It's about mutual respect. Respect is a two-way street. The man is to respect the woman is to respect the man. Both are biblical. It's also about harmony. That we would work together with one another, not against each other. And it's about complementarity. The differences are there. They're real. They're designed and given by God and should be respected, affirmed, and valued. Think about a really good choir. Some sing soprano, some sing alto, some sing tenor, some sing bass. These different choral parts all are different, but they deserve respect. They need to be honored. They need to be heard. All of these different parts play a different role. None is better than the other. None is more significant than the other. All of them are vital to the sound of the choir. There's also in complementarianism a unified destiny. And this goes back to the very beginning. We are created in the image of God, and therefore that unified destiny, we stand as a person before God level at the foot of the cross. Galatians chapter 3, verse 28, Paul writing says this, "There is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, there is no male and female, for you all are one in Jesus Christ." This is not an erasing of those different distinctions, but rather it's declaring that before Jesus Christ, on the grounds of the cross, we all share a unified need for a Savior, a unified way to God, and a unified eternity secure in Jesus Christ. The curse, the fall in Genesis chapter 3 has brought about great confusion and conflict at every level. But remember, Christ is making all things new. As we look further in the coming week at Ephesians chapter 5, this biblical worldview will be the basis upon which we understand what Paul is writing to the Ephesians in Ephesians chapter 5. How do these different roles and distinctions look, and why do they matter? It's not because one is greater or lesser than the other. It's because God has created us in His image, each of us, male and female, for His design and His good purpose. Our society right now is greatly confused on the issues of gender and identity. The current waves of our culture are ultimately in an all-out assault against God's good design in creation, making humanity both male and female. But we as Christians need to celebrate God's good design. We need to celebrate that God has made you a man or a woman in His image, and by honoring this is where we will find God's goodness. It's where we will see what makes ultimately for happiness and human flourishing. So let us together celebrate that God has made male and female in His image.